Hey, welcome to day 16 in this self-sufficiency series. And today we are talking about turning waste streams into resources. This very much ties into our thinking, right? If you're not thinking in this way, if you're not constantly looking on how you can turn quote unquote waste streams into resources, oftentimes you will not find them or you will not see them. Okay, that's just the way it is. If somebody tells you to start thinking about something, or they tell you about some product or some vehicle, all of a sudden you start seeing that vehicle, okay, or that product, and which is how advertising works as well. So, right, they want to put it in your mind constantly. But with your thinking, you should always be looking for how you can take quote unquote waste streams and turn them into resources. And I want to start with a couple of examples from industry, okay? Because this turning waste streams into resources is not just a permaculture principle. This is a principle that's been around for a long time, and in fact is used extensively in business and industry. They're constantly looking for a way that they can take their waste streams and turn them into revenue streams, for example. So if we think of this issue and problem that industry had many decades ago, and it was that of fluoride. Okay, they were creating within manufacturing, and they had waste streams in the form of fluoride, and this is a highly toxic substance. And so they were paying massive amounts of money to be able to properly dispose of all of this waste fluoride. And they figured out the genius way of turning it into a revenue stream. And what they did is they convinced dentists and people in general that putting fluoride in water, it was good for people and it's good for their teeth. Okay, regardless of whether you believe that or not, that's what they did. Okay, so they had this stream, this waste stream in fluoride that was a toxin, and that they had to pay a lot of money to dispose of properly, and they turned it into a revenue stream, significant revenue stream. Fortunately, I haven't had to have fluoride in my drinking water for many years due to where we live now, which is we're on a well, and prior to that, in places we live, they didn't put it in the water supply. Okay, so again, not to go down that route of fluoride or anything like that, but it is a good example of turning a waste stream into a resource from their perspective. Okay, now let's look at another example. Okay, so here's another example of industry turning waste into a resource. Okay, so here we have these logs, these pressed logs, and also you have a fire starter down there, again made out of pressed wood and turned into a fire starter by basically putting in paraffin wax and compressing the wood, and it makes this really good fire starter. Okay, but these things right here, this isn't like somebody like taking raw material and breaking it down and then turning it into pressed wood and then making it into fire logs and selling them. This is scraps from mills that are taken. They are processed, and there is some energy usage in making these, of course, but they're taking that waste stream, those shavings, the sawdust, and then turning it into a product. Okay, so that's taking a waste stream and turning it into a resource. Also, I want to give you some home examples. Like, what can we do as homesteaders, or even just suburbanites or urbanites, and how we can take waste streams and turn them into resources. What I'm going to give you is our few examples. More important than the examples or the techniques or methods that I'm showing you, specifically, it is to get this in your mind that you should always be looking for things and seeing if there's a way that it can be repurposed, reused, and turned from a quote-unquote waste stream into a resource. These are prunings from an apple tree. Now, most of the time, when I prune trees in my property, I leave the prunings. I just leave them. They're eventually going to break down, and they're like a very, very slow release fertilizer, or they're a mulch that breaks down over years and years and years, etc. But one thing that can be done with lot prunings, for example, in this case, is these can be set aside, dried, almost like seasoning firewood, and then turn and be used in a rocket stove, for example, right? They can be used to smoke, for smoking meats, things like that. Okay, so we're taking waste streams and turning it into a resource. What do most people do with their prunings? They burn them, okay, or they throw them away. Okay, instead we can take them and turn them into rocket stove fuel that can in turn cook food, sanitize water, you name it. Or it could be used for smoking meats and any number of other things. Other than that, what I do, like I said, is just leave them in place and let them break down over time, and they become a mulch / fertilizer. Waste from chainsaws. Okay, so you're splitting wood, you're going to get a lot of sawdust. That sawdust can in turn be used. Most of the time we don't do anything with it, and it just kind of goes away. You can collect it up. That can be used as a source for dry composting toilets, right? So for human manure, that they can cover it up, and it can cover up smells. It can be used as a carbonaceous material to be able to compost with that. It can be used for compost as well. Obviously, it can go into the compost pile, but it can also be used to make fire starters. So again, I have this example as something from industry, and now I'm going to show you how I make fire starters. Now I have an entire video on making fire starters, how I do it, and so check that video out. And by the way, hit like on this video and subscribe to our channel if you would. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. But let's take a look, and I'll show you how I take waste material from cutting wood, and or bedding material from animals, and turn them into a fire starter. There we go. We take chainsaw waste, we put it in a little tea bag, and we put about an ounce of paraffin lamp oil on it, and there it's a fire starter. So we can take, again, waste stream, resource. Small scale composting is another excellent way to turn a waste stream into a resource. Most people, again, throw that stuff away. Coffee grounds, vegetable waste, fruit waste, grain waste, all of that. Now, I would say, for another excellent way to go ahead and use this kind of stuff is to separate out what can go to animals and what can just be composted. And that's not a bad method either. We've done that in the past quite a lot. And in fact, we still do it really. Is if it can go straight to the animals, it goes straight to the animals. If it gets composted, it gets composted. But here's kind of small scale composting that's very beneficial, and it's an excellent way to create a resource. Okay, so in addition to small scale kitchen type composting, we do large scale composting. And I just want to show you, this has been composting since last fall over the winter, and if we kind of turn it just a little bit, and I don't really turn these so much, but let's see if we can. I just saw some. Okay, we're making really, really good compost here. Really good compost. There's plenty. There's worms in here. It's really good stuff. And the one thing I want to point out also is you will find unusual things that most people will tell you based on silly lists that you can't compost this type of stuff. These are bones. We compost animal carcasses, innards when we're processing animals, you name it, we compost it on a kind of a larger scale. You just have to understand what it takes to compost that type of material and also, depending on how you're going to utilize that waste stream. Okay, so people say it's not safe to do that. Well, if you understand pathogens, you understand hot composting and how that impacts compost, then you'll be fine. And always as a last resort, then don't use it around vegetables, but you could use this type of compost around fruit and nut trees and things like that, or around landscape plants if you're really concerned about it. But there's always something that you can use it for. And we're really limited by our creativity and what we see as structures or rules that tend to limit us. And so we don't want that to happen. All right, so you think outside of the box. We think of water that's flowing on our property, and in most cases, the water that either temporarily or the runoff, snow melt, etc., that comes through our properties, rainwater, and it just kind of flushes off. And our goal is to remove it from our property as fast as possible. Okay, we want to slow it down. We want to spread it out and soak it in as much as possible. Okay, like I said, most people would consider the water as kind of a waste stream, right? Otherwise you wouldn't want to try and get it off your property as fast as possible. Now, understandably, we want to get it away from our foundations and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, otherwise. So we have a series of ponds, little silt ponds, and then, bigger ponds down there from this temporary water flow. But we can also, so we I guess what I'm saying is we have slowed it down a lot. In fact, this is I don't know, it runs for a few months, 4 months or so. There's Bandit. And now we have water 12 months out of the year, okay, in ponds and things like that. No, the stream itself doesn't run for 12 months, but we do have water now for that period of time. But one thing we can do is that we can literally just, and I do this a lot, is divert the flow into places like that. So we've got that little swale there that's got trees planted on it. They're still dormant right now, but we're just going to kind of divert this water, and it's something I do usually every spring, and it'll kind of saturate that swale. Okay, so it'll move water across it, and it'll allow all that water to soak in. Okay, and usually by the time this stream stops flowing, right, that swale has been nice and super saturated, and it's got loads of water, and then I don't end up irrigating until really late in the year. All right, I've got the video sped up here just a little bit, and all I'm doing is I'm building up this little dam wall temporarily, just so most of the water can be diverted and flow into the swale, and in turn, we'll fill up the swale first before overflowing back into our little temporary stream. Okay, so that was literally less than 5 minutes worth of work. I did a minute on that side and then put some rocks in there to armor it just a little bit. A couple minutes of work on this side, put some rocks in there, and you can see in just a few minutes we're already getting that water to travel, and it'll eventually fill that entire swell. And then it will, when it overflows, it'll backfill over here back into this little stream. Okay, so again, it's one way turning waste stream, literally stream, that is normally wasted into a resource without hardly impacting anything at all. The amount of water that will be in this swale is pretty minimal compared to the flow that goes out there. And plus the spillway for that pond, which is actually right in there, meets back up with the seasonal runoff and back down eventually into the streams that are down there, and all is good. here's another example. This pipe here is coming down here. I'll explain that here in a minute. But that, again, that's that water flow that was just, that we just looked at down there, that tied in. I did 3 to 5 minutes worth of work and diverted a bunch of water into the swells that are along there. Okay, and then what I did here is the same thing, except for I just used this old well pipe and repurposed it, and it's now used for irrigation, but passively. So down there, it just kind of flows passively into this swale, as you can see. And then see if I can, I don't know how well this will show up, but there's the water. Okay, and wait, there's some concrete coming back. And then we can see, we can kind of follow it. The water is coming down this way, and you can see it flowing from right to left. And then it's going to fill up this entire swell that goes around the corner and goes like that. And what happens is this, over a couple days, will fill all the way up, and then it'll backflow, and then it'll overflow this here, and then drain down into there and back into its normal flow. And you can see, again, I did a couple minutes worth of work over there, built it up just a little bit so I can fill up the swell quicker and get it going. So again, taking a waste stream and turn it into a resource. There's some plum prunings right here from this plum tree, this Italian plum. And again, most of the time I prune and I leave it where it's at. But again, that could be used. And then there's some cherry prunings over there. And this is going to be really a boon because of all of this passive irrigation that's occurring. Because in general, I do not irrigate these pastures at all. Okay, it's not that I'm not against irrigation at all, but I don't quite have the system here yet to be able to do that. Our well is not strong enough to do that, so I don't want to do that. And I'm still working on being able to capture and utilize this water. But the problem is, when I have all this abundant water, is when I don't need it. I don't need the irrigation. Now, I do have these ponds, of course, that do stay filled with water. And over the summer, they do go down. And so I may end up hooking up some kind of a system where I can irrigate. I've done some minor irrigation when it's been real dry, like pumping out of the ponds and things like that. But I want to come up with a better system. Okay, so there's another example, taking a waste stream and turning it into a resource. Another one, we can urinate. Okay, I covered this in my last video about urinating on plants. Okay, a literal waste stream out of the body and next to plants, right? It's not going to harm it. It's going to be fertilizer for those plants. And so there's an easy way to turn waste stream into a resource. One last example is pictured here. On the right side, you see a compost pile that is a hot compost pile, and we're talking internal temperatures of about 150 degrees. Out the other side came water that was about 110. We would use that water to take outdoor showers, pictured in that little structure. The water would be used for showering, and then it would flow into a small little swale behind that structure, and then it would soak in, and then that in turn would irrigate a small tree nursery. Okay, so this is utilizing gray water, essentially, turning a waste stream into a resource.